Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Donna, to that very nice introduction, and thank you also for sharing your personal story to help set the stage for all of us for the topic that we are here to learn more about. Most of you were here last fall when I did a full presentation on the topic of marijuana. And I believe it is so important for us as responsible adults to continue to keep this issue in the forefront. This issue is about our kids and their future and the future of our country. So today I'm going to give you a quick update about this emerging public health threat and then turn the discussion over to our panelists. Every 2 years, students in the 8th, 10th, and 12th grades throughout the state of Arizona participate in a survey that's called the Arizona Youth Survey. It surveys their attitudes about drug use and alcohol. This year, over 48,000 students in Arizona participated in this survey. And here are some of the findings that should concern all of us. 1 in every 5 high school seniors is now a regular user of marijuana. For our 10th graders, 1 in every 8 is a regular user of marijuana. And for our 8th graders, remember our little 8th grade kids? 1 in every 10 is now a regular user of marijuana. 80% of all kids who use marijuana on a regular basis started before the age of 16. And 1 in 8 kids who is a regular user of marijuana actually started in elementary school. Here in Yavapai County, drug offenses committed by our kids increased 24% over the past year. And most of those are marijuana. And here's what's most alarming. 66% of our school kids think there is little to no harm in trying marijuana. That permissive attitude increased 26% from the year 2006 to the year 2014. 47% of our kids believe that there is little or no risk in using marijuana on a regular basis. That attitude has increased 117% from 2004 or 2006 to 2014. In other words, at an alarming rate, more kids than ever before believe that marijuana is harmless. That attitude is exactly what the backers of the legalization of marijuana movement want all of us to believe. And it is absolutely false. Marijuana is a harmful, addictive substance, more potent today than ever before, and particularly harmful to the developing adolescent brain. It artificially stimulates the reward circuit of the brain, providing reward without effort. 1 in 6 of our kids who tries marijuana will become addicted. For kids who use marijuana, research proves a clear decline in the odds of successfully completing high school, substantially increased odds of later marijuana dependence and addiction, substantially increased odds of using other illegal drugs, and substantially increased odds of later suicide attempts. A long-term study of marijuana users who began young and used into adulthood finds a loss of up to 8 IQ points. In other words, this is a drug that makes people stupid. And is that really what we want for our kids and their future and the future of this country? Across the country, we are finding that youth use of marijuana increases when a state legalizes the drug for, quote, recreational use. Some people think that legal marijuana just means that your next door neighbor can now smoke his pot in peace. That is not what legalization is about. Legal marijuana is a competitive commercial industry that makes their money from an addictive product. And I have a few slides to show you what legal marijuana looks like in Colorado. If you can look at the screens, you can see, first of all, there's lots of candies, gummy bears, ice cream, popcorn. And what the manufacturers are doing is making it look attractive to kids and making it look like candies and treats that we're all familiar with. On the screen, you can see the Klondike bar, much like the ice cream Klondike bar. You can see popcorn that looks like our kettle corn, and then the gummy bears. Next slide, please. In this slide, you see lollipops. You see Pop-Tarts, P-O-P tarts, like our Pop-Tarts. You see something that looks like the Snickers bar, and in the center of that screen, you see an ad for marijuana. That is legal. One thing I want everyone to understand, that commercial speech is protected under our First Amendment, just like I'm up here speaking today. So what legal marijuana means is the right of an entire industry to market and advertise and try to get more people to use their product so that they can profit off of it. Next screen, please. This is an industry that targets the young. They are the most likely to become addicted, and the younger you become addicted, the more likely you will continue to be addicted over your lifespan. On the screen right now, you see one of the latest products that has just come out in Colorado, and it's called the Marijuana Pixie Stick. Anybody remember Pixie Sticks from when we were little? So there you have it. It sells for between $6 and $22 per stick. One for the morning use and then one for the evening use. And one new user who tried it found that he could barely speak. He was sick to his stomach, he couldn't see, and he was knocked out of reality. This is a product that is on the market in Colorado right now as we all sit here. Next slide, please. I like to compare big marijuana to big tobacco, because tobacco was all about marketing a product that they knew was harmful, but they managed to keep it secret for years and years. This is out of Colorado as well, and it's what is called a juju joint. It looks really much like cigarettes. It is a disposable joint, and it contains a huge amount of mind-altering THC, the ingredient that is found in marijuana. You know, some people say to me, well, why can't we just regulate legal marijuana so that they can't advertise, like the tobacco industry? The answer is, we cannot do that because commercial speech is protected under the First Amendment. The only reason we can regulate the tobacco industry is because they settled in 1998 a lawsuit that was brought by the attorneys general from across the United States against the tobacco industry for their 50 years of covering up the harm that they knew that tobacco was causing. And so the tobacco industry settled, and part of that settlement was their agreement not to advertise. So like alcohol, like pharmaceuticals, this is a product that has a right that is protected, and they have a right to very aggressively advertise, as you're seeing on this screen. So with that background, I want to spend most of our time having you hear directly from our panel. I frequently hear the backers of legalization of marijuana say that it should be legal because marijuana is safer than alcohol, and that marijuana never killed anyone. Our first panelist, Sally Schindel, is here to tell you otherwise. Sally spent most of her career as a financial advisor. She has been living in Prescott since 2002 and retired in 2008. Her passion now is to travel with her husband, Greg, and volunteer with organizations that make a difference in the lives of our young people. She's the proud mother of two. She has a daughter whom she calls the light of her life, and a son, Andy, who died in 2014. As Sally will tell you, Andy's death is linked to marijuana addiction. Sally joined MatForce this past fall in order to help Andy help others with a powerful message for all young people. And I know that you all will provide Sally with your support, your encouragement, and your compassion as she shares her son's story with us. Please welcome Sally.
Is this turned on? It is. Thank you, Sheila. I introduced myself as Andy's mom. I am Andy's mom. You already know that Andy died by suicide. It was March 1st last year in Peoria. He was 31 years old. A note was found in his bedroom that ended with these words: "I want to die. My soul is already dead. Marijuana killed my soul, plus ruined my brain." And I'm not going to have you listen to my 20 to 30 minute long story of Andy's life today. I've been sharing that story with groups, including kids at our juvenile detention center, alternative schools, as well as any adults I can find to talk to about voting on the issue of legalizing recreational marijuana. So I'm happy to share that with any group. But here is the short version for you today. Andy was a great guy, and he was a really fun kid. And the first 23 years of Andy's life were quite constructive, despite some early experiments with marijuana and alcohol, starting at about age 13 or 14. He accomplished a lot and had bright dreams for his future. He was, at that time, kind of a self-made young man, and he had accumulated a net worth of $40,000. He was debt-free by the time he was 21 years old. He owned a nearly new truck he paid for with cash from Army pay. He did that. He accomplished that by working hard, by saving prodigiously, never touching any gift that was ever given to him as a child. He was an 82nd Airborne paratrooper, Army veteran. He had 3 years of active duty and service in Iraq. He started working hard at age 16. He was well respected by employers. But my favorite trait of my son Andy was how good and loyal he was to his friends. He was always helping them, especially some friends who struggled with addictions to meth and to heroin. And that's why Andy's choice of drug was marijuana, because it was safer, so everyone says. And that's why I carry Andy's story and his message to others today, to help Andy help others, because that's what he always loved to do. At about age 25, he was in school and working and living what appeared to be fairly normally, but something was beginning to go wrong. Something I can now recognize as marijuana addiction, but something that I had no clue about at that time. He began to have difficulty in school. He dropped classes, made extremely slow progress at earning credits while he worked on a college degree. He couldn't seem to get much of anything done, and he didn't have his bright dreams of his future anymore. After such a bright beginning that he had, he began to fail at everything. I didn't know it was marijuana taking over his brain. I don't think Andy knew it either. Addiction is like that. Denial is part of that package. Andy began to isolate from his family and friends. He started to fall behind in his finances and to worry about that incessantly. He began to slowly eat into the savings that he'd so carefully protected when he was younger. And that was absolutely devastating to Andy. His self-confidence was plummeting. And his first call to a suicide helpline was in 2009 at age 26. 2 weeks of hospitalizations and introduction to the county mental and behavioral health care and VA systems, a diagnosis of depression, and 2 weeks of sobriety woke Andy up and cleared his head a bit so he could make a new try at things. He finished an AA degree, Mesa Community College, 3.4 grade point average. But then job changes and job losses began to occur, and they became frequent. And Andy's attitude about everything was becoming extremely negative. I didn't even recognize my son by that time. This was just the beginning of a slow and an awful decline. By 2011, at age 28, Andy was hospitalized again, earned a year of court-ordered mental health care, and an additional diagnosis of severe cannabis use disorder. He lost his legal right to own weapons. He lost his home. By 2013, Andy had nothing left to his name but his truck. All he had accomplished when he was young was gone. And he lived most of the last 3 years of his life with his dad and his stepmom in Peoria. And during those years, he was arrested on a marijuana possession charge, and oddly enough, in my opinion, that's one of the best things that happened to him in his later life, because he elected to use the state task program, the TASC, a program to get sober and have the charge removed from his record. And during that sobriety, a little window opened again in his mind. He mended fences with his family. He talked a lot with me. We hiked together, and his dreams were coming alive again. His confidence was returning. Our marijuana laws were working for him. He ended a long period of unemployment and went back to work, landing a good job as an electrician apprentice. But sadly, the sobriety did not last long after the completed task program. Marijuana addiction took him right back. And I go to Andy's gravesite now, Phoenix VA National Memorial Cemetery. I talk to him now about working with me. We wanted to do that years ago. Marijuana interrupted and destroyed our plan for that. But I realized there at the cemetery that Andy and I still have the opportunity to work together, and that's how I feel when I offer Andy's story to you. I offer it to the press, to anyone who will listen to me. Andy and I are working together, finally. And this is private stuff that I'm revealing about Andy. I worried about that for many months before I realized that Andy gave me the right to do this. That note that was found in his bedroom after his death also said, "I am setting my parents free." I feel free to tell you his story. I feel that he and I are working together now. Hopefully, we're helping to shape policy regarding marijuana, and that may help another escape that grasp of an addictive substance. I tell this story to help Andy help others, because that's what he always loved to do. In his last few days, he finally told me and his father and his social worker that he absolutely had to quit using marijuana if he was to live, but he couldn't do it. He was addicted. He bought and used it one day, and he flushed the remainder. The next day, he bought and used it again, and he asked me to witness him flushing the remainder. And I asked him if it helped him feel better. I asked him if it helped lift his depression, and I still see the big tears in my son's eyes as he answered me, "No, Mom, it makes me feel sadder." And that was the last day I saw Andy. That's the last day I got to hug him. It was just a few days before he died. Andy was an Arizona Medical Marijuana Program card holder. He told me how he obtained the card and how ridiculously easy he thought it to be. So I've since investigated myself and found him to be so right. I have visited 21 dispensaries in Arizona and Colorado, and they've been quick to tell me how to become certified and become a customer in their store. Anyone with pulse can easily obtain a medical marijuana card. And I'm horrified by what I see going on right under our noses. In my mind, there isn't much about the medical marijuana dispensaries that resembles anything medical. They look like candy stores to me. They look like heaven to the drug users. I was recently in Telluride, Colorado, and I visited all 4 of their combination medical recreational marijuana dispensaries. They all denied that marijuana is addictive. In one, they told me that my son's diagnosis of severe cannabis use disorder is just anti-cannabis lobby talk. There is no such thing as marijuana addiction in Colorado because their state medical marijuana program does not require them to disclose that risk. At least in Arizona, the state program does require that dispensaries disclose something in writing in their patient literature. And though I did find that the personnel in Arizona dispensaries will tell customers that there is no truth to marijuana being addictive. They just have to write it in there. I've asked in dispensaries if they would help and counsel a patient if they appeared to be abusing and overusing the drug. And the answer from them is, "No, we're not doctors. We can't do that." And these are medical marijuana programs. I just imagine a recreational marijuana program. I know that Andy's mental health was complicated by depression, possibly a personality disorder, possible PTSD, though Andy himself denied that. I can't blame marijuana alone for Andy's death, but I do blame marijuana for the ease with which it's used for self-medication. It can then imprison that addicted user in a private hell. And I don't believe anyone who persists in saying that there has never been a death from marijuana use. The coroner doesn't even test for marijuana after a suicide. Andy's death was clearly related to marijuana use. He told us that in a quite clear fashion. Andy died far too young. He was such a great guy. We miss him terribly. Andy and I are here today to help you all see that marijuana truly is addictive. Lives can be lost by marijuana use. I want to ask that you help voters fully understand all the issues surrounding legalizing marijuana before they agree with the folks that are saying it's harmless, that it's never killed anyone, that it's not addictive. Even one more kid that grows up like Andy and only lives to age 31 is one too many for me. When I think about fully legalizing marijuana, like so many want to do, I see so many kids like Andy just being thrown under a bus. How could we possibly do that without better information, without better research, without better programs that are all in development right now? No one's kid should ever be thrown under the bus in a rush to legalize another addictive substance. Let's slow down and wait for the research to improve. I am not in opposition to marijuana being used for medical purposes, but can't we please make sure we do it safely? What I have seen firsthand, it is not safe. So thank you all for listening to me today. Let's make the world a safer place for our kids.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you. We're going to go on to our next panelist, but we did reserve some time at the end for questions of everybody up here. Our next panelist is Dr. Ed Gogek, who graduated from the University of Illinois College of Medicine and did his residency in psychiatry at the Maine Medical Center in Portland and the University of Western Ontario in London. His lifelong interest in substance abuse and addiction recovery began during his residency in 1984. In 30 years as a psychiatrist, Dr. Gogek has worked in prisons, homeless clinics, community health, mental health centers, private practice, and many, many substance abuse treatment programs. He has practiced psychiatry here in Prescott for 20 years and worked for several substance abuse programs. We are fortunate today to have him on our panel. He is one of the statewide leaders who has shown courage and is willing to publicly confront all of the myths and the lies that are out there about marijuana. What I'd like to do, Dr. Gogek, with you is direct a couple of questions to you. And my first question really is a follow-up to the story that Sally just shared with all of us. And one of the things that concerns me is when I go out in the community, how many parents don't seem to understand how harmful it is that their son or daughter has started to use marijuana. And what I see frequently is a parent who says, well, that's just adolescence, and that bad behavior is just adolescence. So Dr. Gogek, could you explain to all of us what marijuana does to the user, how it impairs judgment and functioning, and what the symptoms of use, addiction, and withdrawal from the drug are?
Let me first talk about adolescence and marijuana, because what science has learned over the past 20 years is the teenage years are really special. It's a time when the brain reorganizes itself, and they call it pruning. It cuts down like half the connections, but makes them really stronger, and it does it all based on what the teenager is doing. So, and that's why, and it helps them learn. So that's why kids learn these things really fast. You know, you'll see a teenager who starts playing guitar, and 6 months later he's performing. You know, same thing with sports, same things with school. It's what's happening is whatever they're doing, the brain is shaping itself to be better at that. And at the same time, the brain is giving up things that it doesn't use anymore. I think about this. I stopped playing piano at age 10, just before this period of synaptic pruning. It's gone. I don't remember any of it. But the things that I did as a teenager, like poems I memorized, they're still there. And that's what happens. So you've got, when a teenager is using drugs, the brain does the exact same thing. The parts of the brain that enjoy getting high are strengthened, and it's permanent. And that's why teenagers who use any drug, cigarettes, tobacco, marijuana, anything, are more prone to be addicted and more prone to abuse other drugs as adults. It becomes permanent. The other part, I said, as a teenager, the things that you don't use, you lose. And that's what they say, use it or lose it. And so, teenagers should be doing everything, which of course they like to do. But if they're using drugs, when people use drugs, what they're doing is stimulating the pleasure centers of their brain with the drug. And they're not getting pleasure the way we're supposed to, which is by having healthy relationships, by having activities, by entertainment, all the normal ways that people get happiness. They lose interest in those. That's why they'll tell you, drug addicts lose interest in everything. Well, if a teenager does it, they lose interest in all. The brain permanently quits finding pleasure in healthy ways. And so for the rest of their lives, they are not as capable of finding healthy pleasure. And people will deny this, but you see it. You see people who were drug users as teens, and they'll talk about, they'll say, oh, those people are so straight. They don't. And what they really mean by that is that those people get pleasure in normal ways that drug users no longer can do. Drug users get pleasure from crazy things, like doing drugs. There's a study that really showed this well. There was an Australian study, and they looked at adults, people in their mid to late 20s, and asked them how much marijuana they'd used as teenagers, and figured out those who never used, those who used fewer than 100 times, those who used 200 to 400 times, or more than 400 times, which is an awful lot. That's really, more than 400 times is absolutely good. And what they found is that the heavier their use, the more likely they were to be on welfare as an adult, to be unemployed sometimes as an adult, the less likely they were to have graduated from college. And it's really striking. It's about, the non-users, about 35% graduated from college. The ones between 200 and 400 times, about 10%. The really heavy users, about 2%. I mean, it's really striking. The other thing that they did is and also their income was lower. Marijuana users earn less as adults. They're less motivated to work. The other thing they did is they gave them questionnaires about intimacy satisfaction and just life satisfaction. And what they found is that the ones who used marijuana more than 100 times as teenagers were less happy with their close relationships and less happy with life. And that's what's happening when teens use marijuana. So we have to, and that's happening. So what they're doing is they're changing their brain permanently. And that's the whole problem with teen use. That's something that we don't, the few people who start as adults, and it's very few who actually start as adults, don't have that problem. In the research, they found, like the IQ study, they found that the ones who started as adults, if they quit smoking marijuana, their brain function completely returned. But the ones who started as teenagers, it never returned. And that's really the big problem with it.
Could you, Dr. Gogek, talk a little bit about the signs of addiction to marijuana? And then what happens when somebody tries to stop using? What are the withdrawal symptoms? I've heard people say that marijuana addiction isn't real, and that there's really no withdrawal problems with withdrawal, and I can quit anytime I want to. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, they really push this. The National Organization for Marijuana, what is it? National Organization for Reform of Marijuana. It's a pro-marijuana. And they've got something right on their website that says marijuana addiction is a matter of semantics. They really play it down. The Drug Policy Alliance, another pro group, says that the risk of becoming physically or psychologically dependent is mild compared to other drugs. It's not. And it's a really bad message, because what it does is it tells the people who are addicted to marijuana that they don't have a problem. You know, if you're addicted to cocaine or alcohol, there's all sorts of public service messages telling you that yes, it's a problem, of course you can't quit, you need help, and people get help. If you're addicted to marijuana, you've got all these messages telling you there's nothing wrong with you, and people don't know that they can get help, but it really is. And I see people who are embarrassed that they're addicted to marijuana, they had to get help for it. The actual symptoms, you brought one up, the main symptom I see in people who are addicted to marijuana is they say all their money goes to marijuana. That's really the first thing that starts to happen. And it's a really regular story that they had savings and then the savings are all gone and they're stealing from family members. I had a family member steal from me and admit it 20 years later. That's the biggest thing. And the thing is, there was a really nice study done. And what they did is, it was in Burlington, Vermont, it's a small town, and they just asked, they put a few ads in the paper, and they just said, we need volunteers of people who are having trouble quitting smoking marijuana and need help. 1 of every 3,000 residents volunteered. There's a lot of people. I mean, it's a fair number of people. And when they looked at them, they had all the same signs that alcoholics and heroin addicts had. They keep using even though they have problems. You know, alcoholics will say this, I know it's causing problems, but they keep drinking. Repeated efforts to quit or cut down. That's the problem I ask alcohol patients all the time. You know, I always ask them if they try to quit. And that's why I see, I treat a lot of heroin addicts, and they're constantly trying to quit. Same thing with people who are addicted to marijuana. They're constantly trying to quit. Withdrawal symptoms, there's a whole marijuana withdrawal syndrome. The main 2 symptoms are insomnia and irritability. And people will say they get those symptoms. One person put it really nicely. She said, it's like being hungry, starving. You just have to use. You know, it's like when you're hungry, you have to eat. It's the same sort of feeling. Excessive time spent using, always having to use before they go out and do anything. And also using in situations they know they shouldn't. So people who are getting stoned in the morning before going to work or going to school. People who smoke and drive even though they know that it's dangerous. Although the denial is incredible. Most marijuana users insist it's not dangerous. But those are the symptoms we see. They have all the exact same symptoms of any other addiction, and that's what these researchers prove.
Dr. Goad, would you talk a little bit about big marijuana? In your professional experience, explain to our audience how the pot lobby and big marijuana are misleading the public.
I almost want to quote that thing from B.J. Montini that was there today. He basically wrote a column in today's Arizona Republic, basically threatening the legislature, saying if you don't legalize it, we will come in and do it. And now the marijuana movement is not just a bunch of stoners, it's all people with a lot of money who can get their way. And that's really what's happened with this, is that it started out with there's a few billionaires who donated a lot. This is basically, the whole legalization thing has been bought. If it weren't for 3 billionaires, George Soros, John Sperling, and Peter Lewis, there would be no medical marijuana laws in the country, there would be no legalization. None of that would happen. Where's the question?
Just go ahead and explain some of the pot lobby's lies and the public narrative that they want us all to buy into in order to legalize marijuana.
Yeah, Liberty Mutual did this survey of teenagers, and they found that 75% of teenagers think they drive just as safely high on marijuana. And this is not just teenage bravado, because they knew that they did not drive safely on alcohol. And if you go online, what you'll see are things, and I just quote these. These are just from blogs. The Weed blog. It says, marijuana makes people safer drivers. Marijuana Magazine says, all major studies show that marijuana may actually reduce accidents. It doesn't. Normal website says, marijuana does not appear to play a significant role in vehicle crashes. The Drug Policy Alliance says, there is no compelling evidence that marijuana contributes substantially to traffic accidents and fatalities. Here's my least favorite, the New York Times editorial page. marijuana intoxicated drivers show only modest impairment on road tests. Well, that's true. The thing is, road tests are not the best way to test impairment. It also says they slow down and increase their following distance. That's also true. But the same research study that showed that they slow down and increase their following distance also found that when it came to complicated tasks, they performed much worse and they were more likely to get in accidents. The New York Times didn't tell anybody that. I canceled my subscription. No, actually, I canceled it when they came out in favor of legalization. But that's the story they're telling. The research is really clear. There's a really good study that looked at all the best studies and it's a meta-analysis and put them all together and found out people who smoke marijuana are about twice as likely when they're high to get into a serious or a fatal accident. And people are not getting that message. They're getting the opposite message.
Thank you. The column that Dr. Gogek was referring to was in the Arizona Republic this morning, one of E.J. Montini's columns, which I try to avoid reading, but if it's on marijuana, I force myself to. But it's really insidious because what he says, and this is what the Marijuana Policy Project is doing to us in Arizona. Marijuana Policy Project, based in Washington, D.C., along with Drug Policy Alliance and NORML and some other backers, they spent $3 million in Colorado to get Colorado to pass to legalize marijuana. They spent $9 million in Oregon to get marijuana legalized in Oregon. So now they're here in Arizona. And what they're saying to our state legislature right now is, you should write the law to legalize marijuana in Arizona. Because if you don't, we're going to come in with all our money, and we're going to write a law that you don't like, that's going to hurt you. And of course, any law is going to hurt us, but you know, that's blackmail. That's blackmail. And if you get the opportunity, contact your legislators to encourage them to see that that's just absolute blackmail and intimidation tactics. So thank you, Dr. Gogek, and I'm sure the audience will have some questions for you. And we want to end with Marilee Fowler, who is the Executive Director of MAPFORCE, the Yavapai County Substance Abuse Coalition, and the group that brings to Arizona and many other states now have adopted our Marijuana Harmless, Think Again campaign. Marilee really needs no introduction. She is fearless, she is passionate, and she is tireless. And she is making an incredible difference here in Yavapai County in building healthy communities. And she's going to wrap up with a call to action. Thank you, Marilee.
Thank you. You know, I hit my 8-year anniversary with MAPFORCE this month, and you know, it has been such an honor to work with such wonderful people in Yavapai County addressing substance abuse issues. And I know right now, as I look out at all of you, if I said, how many of you have been affected negatively by substance abuse, whether it's a family member or a friend, a lot of you are going to raise your hand. The majority of this room is going to raise their hand. But if you're somebody who thinks, you know, really I haven't, I want to defer to what Dr. Gogek was saying about people impaired driving. We are all going to be affected by this issue. There is not one of us that is not going to be. You know, we started today with an invocation talking about the future of our children. And that is why my heart is in this 100%, because I have 4 granddaughters that I love beyond belief. And I look at the future for them and I think, you know, we're on a slippery slope here. Dr. Gogek mentioned the Drug Policy Alliance. If you look at what their mission statement is, it is not to legalize marijuana, it is to legalize all drugs. And I will guarantee you that if we go down this path as a country, there will be other drugs that follow. And it breaks my heart. You know, I think about, again, in the last 8 years, and for people that know MAPFORCE, and when Sheila formed MAPFORCE with some other great leaders in Yavapai County, the name is the Methamphetamine Advisory Task Force. That's how we got the acronym MAPFORCE, because we took on the meth problem and had great success. And then we took on the prescription drug problem and worked with our hospitals and doctors and did all sorts of things to address that problem, and we've had great success. And I look at synthetic drugs and the great work that was done in Yavapai County to address that terrible problem, and we've had great success. But I'm going to tell you all that this is the biggest challenge that we have ever faced. Because when you go against meth, pretty much everybody is for you. When you go against heroin, pretty much everybody is for you. But I got to tell you guys, when you go against marijuana, there's a lot of people not for you. And Sheila's alluded to this fact. In Oregon, there was $9 million spent for the pro-marijuana campaign with $186,000 against it. That is what we're up against. So I'm here today to say to every single person in this room, I need your help. We need your help. And just some things that you can consider. You probably have learned some new things that we're going to have some time for questions and answers. We could talk so much about what's happening in Colorado. Please share with other people Andy's story. Share 5 things that you learned today with 5 other people. And we got to get this information out there about marijuana is an addictive, harmful substance. The Marijuana Harmless Think Again campaign, we have bi-weekly updates that we send out, and we keep up to date with what's happening in Colorado. True stories of different people that are negatively affected. The new studies that are coming out talking about the effects on the brain. If you want to get those bi-weekly updates, you can sign up at the back table. You can also take with you one of those sheets and get other people to sign up. We promise to only put out the facts. We only will quote things that are from reliable sources. So that's another way you can help us. Social media. Put comments on Facebook. Follow us. Twitter, if you're with Twitter, retweet the things that we are trying to educate people on the harms. We need to do this from a grassroots effort. We have resolutions that you can as an individual sign, or you can get a group to sign a resolution opposing the legalization of marijuana. It can be a church group, it can be a civic club, it can be a social group, it can be any group of people that just want to take a stand with us. We have over 50 organizations that are now signed that resolution, but we need a lot more in Arizona to show the Marijuana Policy Project that we're here against them. And then look for places for people to speak. Sally has mentioned that she's willing to go out and talk other places. We have a wonderful group of people that are on our Speakers Bureau that will go and present to any group, no matter how small or how large. So please keep that in mind. If you guys know any opportunities, let us go in and tell people the harms of marijuana. It's really interesting. Sheila talked about what's happening in our schools. We do a lot of education in the schools. And I've gone with Kelly Lee, our education coordinator, and it breaks my heart to talk about this topic with high school kids. They do not believe us because they're bombarded with the other side. They need to realize what Dr. Gogek just said. If they start using that substance at a teenage years, their brain will be forever affected. So again, I'm here just to say, please help us any way that you can. This is going to be a grassroots effort for us to beat the Marijuana Policy Project. For those of you that don't know, they're going to be starting to collect signatures, and they're paying the people that are collecting signatures $1.50 to $2.50 for every signature that they collect. There's going to be millions of dollars that come in here, and we need to protect the future of our children. So that's just my call to action, and I think we're going to go to questions.
Yes. Thank you, Marilee.
Okay, folks, we have 3 mics, and Lily's going to take this side of the room. I'll take this side of the room. And
Do you have a question? Please raise your hand. Okay, Pam.
I think this is for Dr. Gogek, or maybe Marilyn. At what age do you recommend that parents start talking to their children about the dangers of marijuana?
I would say when they can speak. And it sounds silly, but I actually remember talking to my mom about drugs at age 4. And it made no sense to me, but I still remember it. So I would say, all the things that you want to know about, you don't talk about it in a scary way at that age, but you still talk about it at that age as a harmful thing.
We have a new campaign called Don't Get Me Started, that any school that will let us in kindergarten, we're in. And what we talk about is healthy choices. The workbook talks about what we put in our body and how it affects our body in a good way or a negative way. And so I agree.
I have a question that's a little off the path that you covered this morning, but it's something that I've wondered about ever since this controversy arose. And that is, what studies have been done, medical studies, that deal with the effects of marijuana smoke on the lungs of the user as compared to the effects of tobacco smoke?
Some of that's equivocal. There's definitely stuff showing that marijuana smokers have higher rates of cancer. So any type of smoke is a carcinogen. So if you expose yourself to any type of smoke, priests who burn incense and are around it all the time have higher rates of lung cancer. So you're always going to get higher rates of lung cancer. The problem with marijuana smoke is people take it in as deeply as possible and hold it for as long as possible. So in some ways it's worse than tobacco smoke, but in other ways tobacco has worse carcinogens. But basically it's a carcinogen.
Okay, I have a question over here for the doctor and also for Mary Lee. I have two questions. First, is there a path we can give to monies that will support, like a not-for-profit, to give to go against these ads?
I'm just going to put in one other plug and let Marilee answer this. I think one of the most important things you can do is contact your elected officials and tell them you care about this issue. Because what's happening is a lot of elected officials think there's just no gain in fighting this. And the only people who seem to act on it are the ones who just personally really care. So I think if a lot of people heard that people care about this, there'd be a lot more people speaking out against it.
And then one other thing here too, isn't it true that the THC is only the active ingredient that alters the mind, that in fact the weed itself, like for some younger children, I think I've heard you speak about this, Sheila, is that that's the part that helps the person do well medically. So in other words, if we take out the THC and just have a drug that isn't mind altering, that would work, is that right?
So I'm going to answer the first one, and then I'm going to give it back to Dr. Goget for the second one. So we actually are in the process of forming a PAC, and maybe Sheila wants to talk more about it. But we've met with a couple of people in Phoenix, and because we do need money to fight this problem, and there's certain restrictions that MapForce has as a 501c3 organization, and we need to protect elected officials and everybody that's involved with this, that we're going to do this on our own individual time, with our own individual resources and equipment. And so stay tuned to more information on the PAC that will be formed. Did you say the name? The name is going to be the Arizonans for Responsible Drug Policy.
Just on the issue of THC, I just want to say medical marijuana laws are legalization. Almost everybody who gets a medical marijuana card is using it as a drug of abuse. There's very, very little medical use. And there doesn't need to be any. There are now 4 medications that are cannabinoid medications that work as well as marijuana. They're more long-lasting. They have fewer side effects. There's absolutely no reason for anybody to be using marijuana as medicine.
I just want to add that clearly there are therapeutic benefits to some of the ingredients that are in the marijuana plants. There are over 400 chemicals in the marijuana plant. So THC, which is the mind-altering chemical, is just one of over 400 chemicals. There is a process in this country to safely deliver medicine, so that when I go to the store to buy Sudafed for my sick child, I know that what is in that bottle is going to be safe. States that have legalized, quote, medical marijuana through the ballot box completely circumvent our country's system for safe delivery of medicine. The researchers are moving forward to benefit from the cannabidiol. It's one of those 400 chemicals that helps with seizures. That shortly will be available. That will be safe medicine. But just as we don't use heroin in order to get the pain-relieving qualities from the opium poppy plant, we go and get a prescription from our doctor for one of the legitimate painkillers. So these medical marijuana programs have just completely circumvented how this country safely delivers medicine to our citizens.
And we have one final question.
As I've been listening to all your comments, the doctor's comments, and each one of you on the panel, the thought occurs to me, what is the end game for these people, these proponents of marijuana usage? We're talking about the supporters of this initiative. Who are they? And what else are they supporting? Dealing with our own children who seem to think that marijuana is like the greatest thing in since sliced bread, we come to realize that ultimately watching these people that use marijuana, it is a control issue. And if you clump that together with the other issues that we've had to deal with in our current administration, we realize that almost all these initiatives that we've been dealing with, including the healthcare initiative, which has nothing to do with giving us good healthcare, has everything to do with control. And so does this initiative. These are people who are trying to change the textbooks in our schools. So what is the end game? This is a really important thing, and I do believe as a physician that it's worth getting behind, and it's not just, oh, some people's kids use this. This is a national issue.
Well said. Thank you very much for that comment. There's really two end games. There's the groups out there. Their end game is to legalize drugs throughout this country. That's the George Soros. He has his Open Door Society, the Drug Policy Alliance. There's a whole other group that makes this even much more of a threat to this country, and that's the group that has gotten into this game for profit. So Wall Street now is investing millions of dollars. The tobacco company, Philip Morris, the old tobacco company, they've actually reserved domain names, cannabis.com, for example. People are positioning themselves to make billions of dollars off of a for-profit industry that makes its money off of an addictive substance. And that's really what becomes so threatening, because they hire lobbyists. They are lobbying our state legislature. They are lobbying Congress. They are lobbying for more favorable positions within the business community, and it is really hard to stop. I don't know what anybody else.
The one thing I'd say is that, again, I'm going to make that plug about contacting elected officials because they don't know that this matters. There are people, look, people don't want their kids to use drugs. That's not a partisan issue. There are people in both political parties who understand this and care about it, but they just don't see that there's any benefit in taking a strong stand on it, and they don't. So it's really important, you know, that we let them.
One thing that they tell me is, look at all the jobs this industry is providing. We need jobs. You know, those anti-cannabis people, they want to take away our jobs. And my reaction is, oh my God, at what cost are we providing jobs in that industry? We've got to measure the risk.
Okay, folks, I know this has been a great program, and I know we could sit here for another hour and listen to lots of stories and lots of questions. But I'd like to thank our panel. They did a great job. Okay, we have one other person we'd like to bring up just briefly, as she knows how important time is. Pam Jones is also on the task force for Matt Force for the Republican Women. She's past president and very colorful lady. I don't think she needs any introduction.
Thank you. Real quick, I only have 2 minutes, but really a minute. First, I want to say something personal to everybody in this room. They didn't know I was going to do this, but I want to publicly thank all of you Republican Women members who sent emails, cards, phone calls, and prayers to David and me when my mom, as you all know, is Yoda, my little person, during her illness and her death. And we did more tests than we can say, and it kept, some days that's the only thing that kept us going. So thank you.